President Trump says the economy is booming, but how are higher prices affecting you? Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson along with our DJ Tolliver. And Tolliver, I know that with the astronomical salary that we pay you here at The Middle, you don't really feel higher prices, but are you noticing that things are more expensive right now?
I should be paying you, first off. And listen, I go to like 4 different grocery stores to compare the prices of mangoes, you know?
Mangoes.
Yeah.
You know, that's, I guess, when you ask someone who doesn't drive, it's not the price of gas, it's the price of mangoes that they notice.
Things, yeah.
Well, you know, gas prices are higher because of the war in Iran. In fact, the average is around $4.06 nationally compared with $3.14 a year ago. Overall, inflation ticked down in June, but it's still higher than it was last year and well above the Fed's 2% target. Americans are paying much more for staples like beef and coffee. And as a result of the squeeze, people have been cutting back on vacation spending, concert spending, dining out. So this hour, we want to poll our middle audience and find out what extra expense is worth it to you right now and what's getting cut out of your budget. As always, our number is 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353, or you can go to listentothemiddle.com. But first, to your voicemails from our recent show asking what should be done about homelessness in America. Listen.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm calling in from Kitsap County, and I was homeless for a year and a half in Seattle, and it was due to drugs for me. Eventually, I'm in prison first, but I found Oxford houses. That was a really, really great stepping stone for me to get clean full-time.
Hi, my name is Kim. A lot of this problem can start with family members who are not able to handle a person who is using, and the person loses their lifeline. Many people would be homeless if it were not for family members, continuing to offer them a place to live.
Hi, my name is Zach Goss. I'm calling in from Kansas City. Homelessness is a housing issue. Just plain, the physical reality is that a person that is sleeping on the street does not have a safe place to sleep indoors.
You can hear that full show and more of your voicemails on our podcast extra, The Follow-Up. Just subscribe to The Middle wherever you get your podcasts. So now to our topic this hour. What extra expense is worth it to you right now in this economy, and what's getting cut? You can answer either or both. Tolliver, remind people how they can reach us.
You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com or comment on our live stream on YouTube.
And joining us this hour, Diane Swonk, Chief Economist at KPMG. She's in Chicago. Diane, welcome back to The Middle.
It's always great to be here.
And from Austin, Texas, David Brown, host of the Business Wars podcast. David, great to have you as well.
Hey, Jeremy. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you. And Diane, how would you rate the U.S. economy right now overall?
Oh, gosh, it's hard to rate because I've never seen anything like it. We've got a low hire, low fire economy, which means the labor market is kind of frozen. Those people who have a job are clinging on, and those who do not are really feeling like they're locked out. They're not able to get their foot in the door. And we have new college grads. The spread between overall unemployment rate and new college grads is more like what we saw emerging from the global financial crisis than what you should see 6 years into an expansion. And underemployment, we call it the U6 rate, where you include people who are discouraged and haven't looked for work or have to take part-time instead of full, that's at 7.9%. That's almost 2 percentage points above where it was pre-pandemic. So there's an undercurrent in the economy. I don't know how to give it a grade because it's so different than anything I've ever seen, but it's also sort of laden with this inequality that we're experiencing that is really quite extreme as well. And you've got a very small number of consumers carrying the economy overall, and it looks good on paper, but doesn't feel like it looks on paper to most Americans.
When you talk about all that, though, it's like it can't be just from Iran or it can't be just from AI. There's other things going on here in the economy.
So, we've had over 5 years of inflation for various reasons, but at the end of the day, much like stock returns compound over time and build wealth and make people super wealthy, there's 430,000 people in this country that have over $30 million in net worth. At the same time, prices have compounded over the course of those same more than 5 years, and the level of prices are too high and out of reach for too many on too many things.
David Brown, how did things look to you economically from your vantage point? And we should say, again, you're in the state of Texas, where higher oil prices are not necessarily a bad thing.
No, that's right. And I think that that summary that we just heard was terrific. It is a kind of tale of two Americas, I think you could say, Jeremy. I mean, and it is extraordinary that we've seen, at least technically speaking, on paper, we're talking about several years of growth now. I guess we're into a sixth year of growth and expansion. And but people aren't feeling that. The vibe is very much negative. I mean, this isn't a recession. Certainly, technically speaking, it's not a recession, but it is a high cost, high interest rate economy, and many people, they're still employed, but they're feeling financially squeezed more so than they were. And it's hard to know exactly what to do next if you're trying to budget for the future. If you're thinking, if you have a young family, you don't know exactly what to do, whether to save, what to cut, what to go ahead and continue spending on. Buying a house remains difficult. Average 30-year mortgage rate is about 6.58%, I believe, something like that.
I think it just went higher today.
Yeah. Wages are barely keeping up, and a lot of that goes right down to inflation.
Well, and Diane, when you look at inflation, it is down from last month, but it's up from last year. Is that mostly because of the war in Iran and what it's doing to gas prices?
It's not just that. I mean, the decline that we saw between the month of May and June, which lowered the pace of inflation, that was because there was hope that things would be done with Iran. That was misplaced.
Obviously not happening, right?
Not happening. And what's important, though, is that it's more broad-based than that. Underlying service sector inflation, before one shot was fired in Iran and in the Middle East, with this war we're in right now, in January and February, service sector inflation accelerated from already elevated levels. And that's a part of inflation that's more insulated from things like tariffs, and we know the full tariffs effects of last year aren't done yet, and we're going to get another whole new round of tariffs in the next weeks and days even, and these are important things, but it's a lot of things all at once. But that persistence in a service sector economy, of service sector inflation, is a sign and a signal that inflation may be becoming entrenched. And I don't use this comparison lightly, because Jeremy, I'm a cancer survivor. I had 13 surgeries during the pandemic, and for me, this is like, you cannot allow cancer to metastasize. And I was lucky to catch all my cancers really early, but I had multiple cancers, and that is really important because inflation is a cancer, and it is corrosive, and it hurts those who can afford it least the hardest.
And do you feel, Diane, like this moment is as risky when it comes to inflation as what we saw in the beginning of the Biden administration, as all the COVID spending was happening, and then we really did see, 9% inflation during that time? Could we be looking at that if the wrong moves are made?
It's not as much that I think we don't get as high as that. However, that doesn't really matter now, because it's out of prices. The level of prices are already out of reach. And I think on top of that, this is the longest bout of inflation that we've had. That price stability is when prices are just no longer front of mind. I mean, we've got that 2% target in the Fed and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, when you don't think about what you got to put in or take out of your cart at the grocery store every day, when you don't think about whether or not you can fill up your tank today, or you need to wait or take fewer trips this week to go to the grocery store, that's when inflation, that's price stability. And we know from the 1970s, and I'm a child of the 1970s, and I became an economist because I grew up in Detroit. This is the arc of my life. The 1970s stagflation was horrible. It was a lot worse than this. However, there's something different between the 70s and today. In the 1970s, income inequality hit a low, a post-World War II trough in 1980. Wealth, there just wasn't a wealth inequality like we have today, because no one had any equity market gains for an entire decade in the 1970s. So the pain we had, as ugly as that decade was shared. Today we have a part of the economy that is spending with abandon. When you see tickets to some of these soccer games, the World Cup games that, were so exciting to watch. It's wonderful that they happened here. But that some of the nosebleed seats were going for $5,000. I mean, that's insane. And, the idea of going to a live concert or to a live sporting event, that's out of reach now for many people, when that was part of that's part of growing up, right? My birthday was often on the opening of baseball. And, you go to the baseball game. I go to the Tiger Stadium, the old Tiger Stadium in Detroit. And that is out of reach for too many.
Yeah.
Just the simple things like that. And then it gets really basic, like food and shelter and being able to afford, a roof over your head.
David,
Basics of life, right?
I saw that you had a report on your show, Texas Standard, recently about how Texans are fed up with high beef prices, so some are just buying the whole animal to put in the freezer so they can buy in the bulk price. But just briefly,
we used to do that in the 70s too. My mom bought it,
right.
but with two women my size and my father, it took a long time.
Yeah,
we never ate it all.
All right, well, David, I'm going to ask you about that right after the break, but we apparently have some sort of a phone issue, and so I'm going to give people a new phone number. So write this down, 800-222-9455. That is 800-222-9455. That is how you can call into the show today. I'm going to give it to you one more time, 800-222-9455. Tolliver, the World Cup just racked up, and I watched a lot of it on TV like so many people, but I could not bring myself to spend thousands of dollars on a ticket.
Yeah, well, some people did, and some people like you did not. Here's a local news report from Houston back in May about just that.
The World Cup is coming to Houston, but for many, the games are out of reach.
Tickets are too expensive and I can't afford it.
What were the ticket prices that you saw?
$400 for each one.
And unless you want to go alone, you're looking at that price multiplied.
With 3 people, so we don't know. That's too much money for us.
And when asked what a reasonable price would be,
We like $200 or something like that. Plus food and drinks, so that's too much.
The average purchase price for a ticket to the World Cup final, by the way, between Argentina and Spain was over $11,000, Tolliver, which means you could have also bought a used Toyota Corolla, which you would still have now.
I was thinking just that. Go out and get a Corolla, even though I don't drive.
Yeah. We'll be right back with your calls on The Middle. So I've noticed something over the last few years. Staying in shape is not nearly as straightforward as it used to be. You can be putting in a similar effort at the gym, eating pretty much the same way, and still feel like your body's working against you. One thing I didn't realize is that as men get older, testosterone naturally declines. That can make it easier to gain fat, especially around your midsection, and harder to hold onto muscle. That is why products like Mars Men have gotten so much attention. Mars Men is a natural supplement designed to support healthy testosterone levels with ingredients like vitamin D, zinc, boron, and fenugreek. Many of the men who take it report having more consistent energy, better workouts, and improved focus. And the company says more than 91% of users report higher energy levels, and they back it with a 90-day money-back guarantee. So here's the thing. For a limited time, our listeners get 50% off for life, plus free shipping and 3 free gifts at mengotomars.com. That is mengotomars.com for 50% off and 3 free gifts when you check out. And after you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them The Middle sent you. This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, we're a national call-in show focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, and philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we are checking in on the state of your personal economy and asking what extra expense is worth it right now and what's getting cut. Our special number, Tolliver, this hour is 800-222-9455. That is 800-222-9455. Or how can people write to us online?
Do you need a jingle? I can think of one in the next break.
Let's do it. Yeah.
You can reach out to us at listentothemiddle.com.
All right. I'm joined by Business Wars host David Brown and KPMG chief economist Diane Swonk. David, so what are you seeing in Texas in terms of how people are adjusting to these higher prices we've been talking about?
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to do this program was because I wanted to hear how everyday folks are really trying to deal with the squeeze, especially folks who aren't don't have a lot of money, maybe middle income folks. You mentioned, Jeremy, this thing about buying whole cows and that sort of thing. And there was a story that we did on this daily news program that I'm on called Texas Standard, which is a statewide daily news program. And we were talking about how people were actually buying a whole cow, which yields about somewhere around 300 to 450 pounds of take-home beef. All right, that requires you having a dedicated chest freezer if you're going to do something like that. But what it really speaks to is a deep consumer anxiety over inflation and, a practical shift, or what may be for some people a practical shift toward, bulk self-reliance, I suppose you could say. But we're looking at households losing patience with the volatility over at the supermarket, and they're trying to lock in predictable food costs for the year. And, for a lot of households, frankly, for years and years, there wasn't much of a close look at the household bottom line. I think it's probably safe to say no shame there. When you think about what we went through during COVID, it became part of our custom to, in fact, it became almost habitual to order out. And that has lingered on, and it's become a kind of now it's become a part of what we consider our expenses, at least for many
And it can
families.
be a lot more expensive than if you just go and cook it yourself.
But it's discretionary, bottom line.
Yeah,
And so I think we're having to
discretionary.
recalibrate all of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's hear from our listeners. Lily is calling in from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Lily, what are you cutting out of your budget, or what's worth it to you right now?
So the things that are worth it to me are like coffee in the morning. That's something that really matters. And I also really like to spend money on clothes and cosmetics. Clothes because I use them basically every day, and cosmetics because they make me feel good about myself. The things that I'm not spending money on are things like travel. People talked about earlier, like concert tickets or sporting events, because I feel like those things are large expenses for a very small time period of pleasure that I'm getting.
Interesting. That's very interesting, Lily. Thank you for that. Diane Swonk, there used to be something called the lipstick indicator, right? People want to spend money on cosmetics because it makes them feel good even when times are tough.
Exactly. That was one of those old indicators, along with the length of your skirts, apparently, as well. Glad that one predated me, but it really is. It is hard. I mean, David really got to the heart of the issue of around. People don't spend enough time. I get in a lot of bubbles where I'm dealing with, people who are fairly wealthy, or, and they haven't been to a grocery store recently. And my job, I make it a real habit of reminding people what's really going on out there. And I think that's important. I mean, people say to me, Diane, you need to get out of your office. And I'm like, well, I need to get, I work from home, so I live at work. But, the reality is that I get out and I talk to people. I go to dollar stores. I go to discount stores. I spend time in the aisles, and I watch. What really strikes me is it's really hard. I watched someone this weekend having to put half of their cart back because they couldn't afford it.
Wow.
And the woman who was running the store was understaffed because she said, oh, it's a Sunday and I scheduled myself wrong. I'm really sorry. And she was apologetic. And I'm like, don't worry about it. And I was just, trying to just give her some space because she felt overwhelmed. But it was heartbreaking. My husband always gets upset when I go, whenever I do this and I come back out and I've got a story. But it's important because that's real life. This is what people are really going through. And I've been there, and I grew up, in a little tiny house. I luckily had a house. But, my best friend went into poverty when I was a kid. And I noticed all of a sudden she didn't have lunch at school. And I told my mom, and my mom was getting a divorce from my father and lost her credit rating, and, but still had a little extra change for her to be able to get food at school as well. And that is really hard. And I think not enough people really spend time talking to each other to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
And also talking across income strata. The 1970s had mobility. You could actually get rung on a ladder and get out of the zip code you were born in. The zip code you were born in didn't determine what you earned in your lifetime. now it does.
Well, this is one of the things that I love about the fact that we are able to broadcast over the air and hear from people of all income levels and people that don't have subscription services to get their news. They can just listen to it for free. Let's get to Kevin in Dayton, Ohio. Kevin, what about you? What are you cutting out?
Yeah, I mean, just today we had to cancel a medical test that for my wife because it was going to be $1,000 out of pocket. And so now we're having to make the choice between one test versus another. So it's extremely frustrating.
And is that something new for you, Kevin, that if this had happened a year ago, you think you would have been able to afford that medical test?
I think that, our class hasn't changed a whole lot, but it's that there are so many other expenses that are eating up more of our budget now with inflation that we have to make those choices more often. So probably if it was a year ago, we would have more cushion to be able to say, let's just do both tests. But that's not the case right.
Can I ask you one more question, Kevin? Is your health insurance, are you getting it through Obamacare? Is it through your employer? How are you able to pay for things generally when it comes to medicine?
It's through our employer. We're both public school teachers. Mm-hmm. But, we have high deductible plans. And the thing that's the most frustrating is it hasn't gotten more expensive to perform those tests. These are choices that are being made far above us about the profits of these companies and I'm looking forward to a day when this country decides we're not going to put up with corporate to charge us just because they can. And they're using this inflation as cover to increase prices on things that have not increased in price of production.
Yeah. Kevin, thank you very much for that call. David Brown, he brings up an interesting point there, and it has been talked about by politicians too, that maybe some companies are using this as an opportunity to raise prices.
No question about it. And I think that we saw this in the automotive sector during COVID. I think COVID rewrote so much that we have yet to fully understand. What we saw during COVID, as I think most people now know, is a huge increase in the price of a car. Even a small car is now, $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 and up. We're not talking about
average
super
price
luxury.
of a car is over $50,000.
Just incredible.
Wow.
And the amount of money people are paying per month is off the charts. It's not unusual to find people paying upwards of, $750, $850, even $1,000 a month. That was unthinkable before COVID. And if you think about what we were told at the time, it was because of what was happening with shipping of parts and the supply chain. That was often given as an excuse for why there were shortages and why we couldn't get what we wanted. And then there was a premium attached to those vehicles that you could obtain. That premium never went away. And I think if someone were to go back and start to do the math on what happened during that period, I think what you're going to see, and we've seen this, by the way, it's not unprecedented. We've seen periodically in the automotive sector when there's been an explosion in the average price of automobiles. This was one of those moments. But we really haven't accounted for how that's impacting our lifestyle writ large. And so, I'm really interested in hearing what people are cutting back on and still spending on.
And we've got a lot of calls coming in. Again, our special number this hour, and it's not because we couldn't afford to pay the bill on the regular number, but it is 800-222-9455. Again, 800-222-9455. Tolliver, what's coming in at listentothemiddle.com?
Gerald from Texas says, I'm considering cutting a cost that'll break my heart, giving my pet away. I pay $20 a month to have a pet in my apartment, then all the pet products on top of that. And then Kyle in Raleigh says, not only has food and housing cost issues for many, but I have 2 toddlers. And if the month has 5 weeks, then our daycare bill is $3,500.
Wow.
It honestly feels like the government is waging a war on us.
Wow.
Yeah, child care and elder care are in a crisis.
Huge.
Unpaid elder care. Men are half of the people who provide care in every single profession. We know from the employment data, they actually know there's a time use survey, and we know that men are providing about half of elder care. On child care, they don't provide as much child care, and women who have flexibility in their jobs can have more, do better. People like me who can work from home. My kids are now grown, so it's not an issue, but that issue, I deal with it with my entire team, are doing what they can for the fertility rate, but what they pay is more than a mortgage
It's so
for
expensive.
their child care. And for elder care, there's a lot of people that are doing unpaid elder care while they're working, and their employers don't even know it, and the stress and strain on them because they can't afford that elder care. And they may have a parent with dementia. I have that in my own household where someone who works for me also cares for her father, and it's very hard. And the amount of stress that puts on workers, and often it flies underneath the radar screen. Under the age of 35, men dominate that group.
Mhm.
And part of it's because of the physical, caring for someone who's got dementia or Parkinson's or health issues, the physical side of it. They're getting sumo wrestlers to deal with elderly in
Yeah.
Japan. But I think these are things that are really hard on people, and the care economy is an area that has really shown a lot of increases. And I think, the idea, you wonder why people aren't having families. The only thing we know that changes the fertility rate is having one day a week, at least when one person is home from
Yeah.
work. And if two people are home on that same day, the fertility rate doubles. So many emerging Asian economies that are aging are now looking at 4-day work weeks because that changes the fertility rate. But it also makes it easier to carry. They're doing something reproductive on that day,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think it's also important because it really gives them some flexibility in how they deal with and the cost of that care.
Let's hear from another listener. James is calling in from Marvel, Minnesota. James, what are you cutting back on?
Well, like I had told the lady that I spoke to before I spoke to you, hamburger versus steak, and luxury items would be something simple like maybe a light beer versus an IPA. And, even a steak sauce would be nice. And one more thing is that if you can ever remember going back to Walmart, every once in a while you would see an item that had a yellow tag, and like let's say a pot roast, you would get maybe a $4 or $5 discount on a yellow tag. Those days are over.
You're not seeing the yellow tags at Walmart anymore.
No, well, if you do, it's going to be like $1 off.
Yeah.
And
what's the difference, by the way, that you're seeing in price between like an IPA and a light beer?
Oh, I would say probably $9 a 6-pack versus 14.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, James, thank you for that call. It's interesting, David, as we hear from listeners, all the different kinds of things. I mean, everything from medical expenses right down to, not seeing $1 off at Walmart, and that can make a real difference.
It's heartbreaking to hear these stories of people having to give up their pets.
Yes.
And of course, and then also this idea of like putting off what would be what we would have considered just a couple of years back, essential medical care. But I have to say that one of the things that I've struggled with is, in terms of understanding what's going on out there, is the lack of an analog for what we're going through. The thing that I think a lot of us think of, especially those of us who were kids of the 70s, is this like stagflation? I can remember back in the 70s that feeling of desperation among politicians about they did not know what to do. I don't know if anyone else remembers the win buttons, whip inflation now.
Yeah.
You remember those?
Whip inflation now, of
Whip
course. That was the
inflation
Ford
now.
administration. Yes.
That's right. But it spoke to a kind of feeling of desperation.
Yes.
And it was across the board.
And turning down your thermostats. Remember,
Oh yeah,
with the sweater,
I definitely
the
remember
sweater.
that.
Yeah.
Which had a huge political cost, I might add.
Yeah.
And now when Ronald Reagan took over in 1981, I guess was when he was sworn in, it was several years before the economy started to kind of regain traction. And even then, it was really among the the upper classes where you first
Yeah, that's
started
when you
to
saw
see.
the inequality start to
That's
widen.
right.
I mean,
No,
it was
no question
the
about it.
back-to-back recessions of 1980, 1981, 82. That is what broke the back of the stagflation, but it also left a lot of people behind.
But here's the
And
thing.
that was really hard.
We now have so much has changed since the 70s that I don't think we fully appreciate. Like, for instance, I'm thinking of these buy now, pay later plans. You've heard about this, Klarna, Afterpay, Affirm. Right,
Yeah,
exactly. And before inflation really started to take a bite out of all of our budgets, those became pretty popular, and people started using those for discretionary purchases. I know someone who works at a local supermarket here in Austin who says that people are trying to put their groceries on these buy now, pay later plans.
Yeah.
It's hard to know exactly what's going on, but I think that certainly among a lot of people in the middle class, there's a real wish, a yearning to try to stay afloat, to maintain things, maintain a standard of living as close to what they have experienced for so long. And I think we're seeing part of that struggle in what people are cutting back on and what they're spending on.
After a short break, by the way, we're going to hear from callers in South Carolina, in Arizona, in Wisconsin, asking people what extra expense is worth it to you right now and what's getting cut. Our special number this hour is 800-222-9455. And Tolliver, you are a musician, so I imagine you've heard about Blue Dot Fever and how it is shaking up the live music industry.
Yeah, for people who don't know, Blue Dot Fever refers to the seating charts for upcoming concerts with all those blue dots marking unsold tickets. And some artists are seeing too many blue dots and canceling their shows. CBS reported on the ripple effects.
Is this the hardest moment you've seen for a working touring artist?
Yeah, it feels like we have to be more creative now to even get shows.
The tours that are selling, Zach Bryan, Taylor Swift, Beyonce, share one thing: a devoted fan base willing to open their wallets no matter the cost.
These bigger artists are now going to go into the smaller capacity rooms, 500, 2,000, 4,000 people rooms, and it's going to kind of destroy the middle class musicians because that's their bread and butter of touring.
I guess you'll just have to keep doing your night job here at the Middle, Tolliver.
Live at Jeremy's house.
Yeah,
Tolliver,
exactly.
20-night stand.
20 people will be allowed in. The first 20
2-for-1 tickets,
$11,000. We'll be right back with more of your calls on the Middle.
Still waiting in line? Again? That's time you'll never get back. Save time and money with Stamps.com. Over 4 million businesses have skipped the line with Stamps.com. Join them to save up to 90% off carrier rates from your computer or phone right now. Print postage for certified mail, registered mail, and packages in seconds. Then schedule a pickup right from your home or office. For a limited time, go to Stamps.com and use code PODCAST for a free welcome gift. Taxes and fees apply.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. This hour, we're asking what extra expense is worth it right now and what's getting cut out of your budget. I'm joined by KPMG Chief Economist Diane Swonk and Business Wars host David Brown. You can call us at our special number this hour, 800-222-9455, or you can reach out at listentothemiddle.com. And let's go right to the phones because all the lines are full right now. Ramses is in Tucson, Arizona. Ramses, go ahead with your thoughts. What are you cutting out of your budget?
Well, thank you for taking the phone call. I appreciate what you're doing, and everybody else that's listening to it really appreciates the message. And we are on cue and on key with what you're saying. So we talked about shelter, we talked about food, but we didn't talk about the third necessity, which is clothing, the common denominator that we all have since caveman days. So I'm in Houston right now. I live in Tucson, Arizona. I have a family of we're 5 of us, and clothing is at a premium right now. So if you go to the stores, especially the big stores like Dillard's or any of the big ones, prices are exorbitant. And then there's the Ross and the Marshalls and things like that. But the common denominator that I'm seeing right now is I have to buy a jacket because it's raining a lot in Houston. So I walked into a Goodwill store, and I see people from all walks of life, all ethnic groups, all income brackets. And this guy was looking at a jacket, and the gentleman goes, this might fit you if you're looking for like a size large. And it was it was an African-American gentleman talking to a Mexican-American. And then there was another gentleman who was Asian also. asking about different sizes, and they were just in like a giant orchestra, like synchronized, trying to find the best deal they can for their family. And I think the thrift store and the secondary use market or third use market is a huge aspect to consider because we never talk about it. It's something maybe a little more intimate.
Yeah, and Diane Swonk, by the way, has been nodding as you've been saying that, Ramses. Diane, are you seeing that in the data, or have you heard of this before?
Yeah, actually, it's one of the things. So there's a couple things happening. One is that we've seen even more affluent households, $100,000 households, moving down the food chain and trying to going to off-price stores, discounters, and resale shops. And I donate actually a lot of my clothes to resale shops, and I happen to be kind of small, but now people are with GLP-1s, they can fit in some of my stuff, so that's good. But I donate a lot because one, I have stuff that's 20 years. I'm old now. I have a lot of stuff that's old, and I want people. It's still good, and I want them to be able to use it. But I remember over the winter we had someone show up, and he wanted to shovel our walk, and we shovel our own walk. We don't need to have someone shovel our walk, but we let him shovel our walk. And, he charges a ridiculously small amount, but he didn't have enough of a coat on. And so I went in and got a coat from my son's old coats, and he handed him a coat, and you would have thought it was like Christmas.
Wow.
And, to see this kid who was going door to door trying to raise money with, I'm in Chicago, it's cold in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And, trying to raise money by shoveling a walk, but not even having a coat to do it. That is heartbreaking.
Let's get to another caller. Anir is calling in from Greenville, South Carolina. Anir, what about you? What are you cutting back on, or what extra expense is worth it to you right now?
Yeah, no, first off, I just want to say thank you to David and Diane for being on the air currently. You guys are touching on all the subjects that I think should be of a major discussion right now, and it's really impactful. So thank you guys, and thank you to the middle team.
Thank you.
But I do want to. It's a great segue onto that. I think one of the biggest things that I've realized in this economy, and compared to all the callers that have made this comment, is that being able to go to the secondhand shops, being able to find ways to get a little bit more creative, to be able to invest in ourselves and invest into others. I think the biggest investment by far that I have enjoyed throughout this economy is the community. I know it sounds a little soppy, but it has been a pleasure to be able to connect with groups of friends, people who, know of a family who's struggling right now to find housing, or just simply to be able to make ends meet. I think really right now we have been able, and just, miraculously been able to just connect with one another and just find ways to get creative, whether it be to go to a Hobby Lobby or Michael's, buy things to be able to, make our own clothes. I think that's the wonderful thing about it, just creativity and love and connection.
That's beautiful.
The idea of investing in your community and the things that we can still spend our time doing together. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there is a silver lining here? If we find
break
each
bread,
other,
not ties.
Yeah, exactly.
Great, David.
I love that comment. Thank you so
beautiful.
much.
Yeah,
and that's the way that there's so many people who don't talk to each other anymore, and I'm always trying to find how do you break bread instead of ties, and also just random acts of kindness. I mean, that's why I take time to actually spend time and talk to people in a store, because sometimes they don't feel noticed either. And
I was
taking that minute to talk to people is important.
I was on a trip last week, and there was no cell phone reception for 4 days, and we all had to talk to each other, and it was great. It was
There you
really
go.
nice.
There you go.
Let's go to Henry in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Henry, what about you? What are you cutting back on?
Honestly, I've been having to cut back recently on, or at least make second decisions about adding principal payments to outstanding debts like student loans or mortgage payments where, 2-3 years ago, I wouldn't bat an eye about doubling or tripling a student loan payment where, I'm incredibly gifted and blessed to be in a career profession in an industry that's been very safe and secure the last 5 years. But now with the food pricing, which, to answer the other side of the question, I spare no expense in the grocery stores. My wife and I love to cook and prefer to do that over going out most days of the week. But now that more of that disposable income is going towards necessities, I have to second guess that debt repayment on a monthly basis.
Yeah. Henry, thank you for that. Diane, is that a good idea, bad idea? I mean, like when people say, I'm just going to put this on the credit card or I'm going to not pay this loan right now because I don't have to. It's not urgent to me.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I think what he's doing is not double paying it, which is,
right.
Unfortunately, then it means he has a longer debt stream that he's got to deal with and the overhang of that debt. But we have seen there's a real bifurcation, and it's part of the K-shaped economy, the inequality, and I sort of hammer on this, but it's important because, subprime loans are going to default at a startling rate. And David, you mentioned the auto, payments.
Right.
Some of those auto loans on subprime are well into the double digits, over 20%. I mean, it's stunning, and that's higher than they were, back in the 1970s when we had much higher interest rates. So, it really is to see some of what's going on, and the idea when David said buy now, pay later. Now in the 70s, I do remember there were layaway.
Yes,
but,
absolutely.
But
you couldn't take it home. You had to leave it at the store.
Yeah. You had to leave it at the store, exactly. You had to pay it off until you could, and then once you paid it off, you could pick it up. But the idea that you can't make those payments, to not even be able to buy food, but also not be able to pay off your debts, and that they're going to compound now at a faster rate. And if they're on adjustable rates at all, they're going to compound at an even faster rate. And so here was someone who was getting ahead on their debt and made enough money to be able to do that, and they can't do that now. And that is something I worry a lot about. And these are the kinds of things that can get people into trouble really quickly, because those compounding rates when you're holding debt, they compound so rapidly now.
And so many people have student loan debt, obviously have mortgage debt and other kinds of debt as well. Let's get
Gen X has the highest amount. Men have more debt than women.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to get ahead of things here, Jeremy, but as I'm thinking about what your callers are saying, I'm thinking there are probably a lot of listeners who are wondering, okay, this feels a little willy-nilly, and I know that there are a lot of people who don't know where to cut. They face some big bill and they think, what am I going to do here? And I feel like no shame here, but we haven't done a great job in this country of educating folks when it comes to financial literacy.
Right.
And we just really haven't. And I think that it would be helpful if we did explore at some point in our conversation, what do you protect? What should you protect? What's the wisdom here when it comes to what you spend on and what you don't? Because it's easy to sort of wag your finger and say, you should cut back on this, because you should cut back on food deliveries and that kind of thing. But there are actual priorities, things like housing, right? Utilities, transportation,
kids,
exactly. Transportation if it's required for work. In many cases, insurance, childcare. But I think that it's useful to think about those things that you must spend on, that you really need to spend on. And getting back to what a previous caller said about investing, think about how we're spending more as an investment and what we can do to reallocate the way that we're spending our income each month.
Well, and by the way, we just did a program a couple of weeks ago about solving homelessness, and one of the things that came up was one town in California is trying to spend money to keep people from becoming homeless because it costs about $6,000 per person to help them with their rent or something like that, as opposed to $45,000 per year per person in the city of San Francisco if they become homeless. That's what it costs. So it's an investment in trying to keep a roof over their head. I want to get to Mary in San Antonio, Texas. Mary, go ahead with your thoughts. What are you cutting back on?
I am cutting back a lot because I am a 62-year-old full-time employee, and I don't see myself retiring anytime soon. And I actually cut back on get rid of my car. That was a major expense, and I work from home, and but I take the bus to go buy my groceries, which is not far away from my house. but that was a major expense for me.
Do you ever
To
see yourself
financially
getting?
secure
Do you see
my
yourself
rent
getting a car again at any point?
I don't think so. The way the economy is right now is it's going to be almost impossible for me to have a car.
Wow.
San Antonio is not exactly a public transit friendly city. How are you going to get around?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is buses all around. That you can go. Where I'm going to go? I'm 62-year-old. Where am I going to go? It's not like where am I going to go? I don't know. I just need to go to the grocery store.
So you're able to take the bus to where you need to go. You're able to get to work and that sort of thing.
Yes. Well, not to go to work.
She works from home.
Works from home. I missed that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
That's a huge, huge benefit.
I mean,
yeah.
one of the things that scares me so much is when I hear people who have to give up their cars. That's one of the last things people default on, because that can be taken away very quickly and found very quickly, and it is their way of getting to work and the way of keeping the food in their house and things like that. You're lucky that you can at least work from home. I'm glad that you can do that, but it is something I really worry about is the affordability on vehicles, because it is something that is a necessity for many families, and it used to be considered standard. You could buy a car or have two cars in front of the house, and that was, standard. That's not something you can do anymore.
Let me ask you something while you're on the line there.
We've lost Mary.
Oh, gee.
But,
well, something that I'd like to hear from some people, and that is like smartphones, for example. They're considered essentials, right? I've noticed that I was trying to reduce our smartphone payment. We have a family of 4, and that's really gotten out of hand before I even realized it. I took a good close look. And it used to be that you could call up the provider and say, hey, listen, I'm noticing I'm spending a lot of money here. I'm thinking about walking away. And this major carrier said, well, okay, thanks.
Goodbye.
Been nice. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So they're not being flexible like they used to be. And I think a lot of us are having to face making some hard choices about, say, the people. We're talking about all sorts of providers: insurance, our internet service, our smartphones. This is something I feel like this is something I feel is really dumb on my part. I recently got a new smartphone, okay, and the smartphone that I had been going for about 7 years. So I'm not one of those guys that just moves up to the next device whenever it comes out. And I figured, well, I've waited long enough, and I'm already starting to have, some difficulty working with some banking apps, for example, that didn't want to use my phone because of security and that kind of thing. So I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and splurge. Boy, what a silly move that was, So I'm guilty of this, but I'm thinking that a lot of us are going to have to take a much closer look at the things that we've taken for granted in the past.
Well,
we used to just go for the next big thing.
And that phone is now going up in price. Consumer electronics were falling in price for decades.
Yeah.
And now they're going up in price rapidly because of the smartphone and the chips and the AI. And related to the AI boom, the costs and the wealth effects of that are showing up before the productivity gains. And that's just boosting those costs even more.
Right.
There's just been a big announcement by one of the largest producers out there, 20% increases. I mean, these are not insignificant increases, and they're off already. $1,000 phones. I mean, that's a lot.
No doubt.
I'm going to sneak in one more call as we wrap up this hour, and that is Barbara, who's calling in from Dover, New Hampshire, and it sounds like was born after the Great Depression, but not long after the Great Depression. Oh, and I lost Barbara, of course. Oh, that would have been so good. I really was excited to hear from Barbara. Okay, fine. We're going to do it. We're going to Bill in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Bill, what about you? What are you cutting back on?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I'm actually cutting back on having my truck repaired. That's one of the expenses, in addition to being so expensive.
Repairs are going up.
You and me both, brother.
Yeah.
There's so many
parts,
electronics.
there's 25% tariff on parts, too.
Oh, that's the other,
lot.
And I'm 70 years old, and I'm working 2 part-time jobs. And why I do that is I have to, pay my medical expense and all that. I got 3 daughters, have student loans, but I still want to meet my friends 50 years out of college. And I do work a couple of part-time jobs to have a little extra money. but I'm deferring things like I say, my truck repairs. I'm a little nervous. You never know, something might happen. But one of my daughters applying to medical school. She's looking at huge expenses. My other daughter's still in college. I started having children late. But, 70 years old and we're still working. A couple of my friends are still working full time. Can I just say one thing? My 3 daughters, they look at the economy and they look at what's going on in the world, and they're really nervous about their future and whether they want to get married and have kids and bring kids into a world that's just in a lot of turmoil financially and environmentally. So anyway,
Bill,
thanks for
thank
taking
you
my
very
call.
much for
Great
that
show.
call. I really appreciate it. And Diane Swonk, we don't have much time, but just I do want to ask you one question, because you are one of the nation's premier economists, and I just want to ask you quickly: do you
I'm just
think
old. I've been around a long time.
do you see a recession on the horizon in this country?
I don't have one in my forecast. Do I think there's a probability of one? Of course there is. And what I worry about most is that there's a lot of leverage, and it's leverage in private debt. There's leverage in the AI bubble. There's leverage within people buying stocks right now. That really worries me. And those are all things that can be a house of cards. And you don't want to live in my head these days. It's really hard. My husband says, you got to start every speech that way. You don't want to live in my head these days. And I try to make people laugh as well. But, I also want people to sort of think about the whole of the economy, not just the part they occupy. Because, a lot of the clients I deal with are dealing with all levels of the economy.
Yeah.
And they've seen the drop-off, especially among low-income and middle-income households.
Yeah.
And those more affluent households aren't making it up.
We got to leave it there. That is Diane Swonk, KPMG chief economist, and we've been speaking with Business Wars podcast host David Brown. Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
And big news next week. Esteemed journalist and foreign policy expert Fareed Zakaria is our guest for the hour, taking your calls about the Iran war and America's role in the world. We're going to have more of your thoughts about the economy on our podcast section. Subscribe to The Middle wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and I will talk to you soon.